A biker father walked into his daughter's school expecting a simple lunch surprise. Instead, he froze. His little girl was on her knees, eating from the floor while a boy laughed above her, and a teacher stood silently. What happened next brought 200 Hells Angels to the school. The cafeteria smelled of reheated food and industrial cleaner. Most children had returned to class, leaving an empty echo of chairs scraping the tile. Morgan Jacks, 44, leather vest adorned with Hells Angels insignia, had come to bring his daughter Agnes a grilled cheese sandwich from the diner. He froze. There she was, 7 years old, kneeling on the floor, tiny hands trembling, trying to scoop up a soggy sandwich, a bruised apple, and spilled milk. She looked smaller than ever, fragile, ashamed. Standing above her was Evan Marsh, 12, broad-shouldered, smirking as he pushed her food aside and laughed. The boy's cruelty wasn't new. It was routine. Morgan's chest tightened as he took a step closer, but he didn't charge. He didn't shout. He just watched, registering the enormity of what his daughter had endured in silence. 10 feet away, Mrs. Dorsey, the cafeteria supervisor, stood arms crossed, watching. No intervention. No shock. Silence as punishment. Morgan's jaw clenched, not because of the boy, not because of the spilled food, but because a system designed to protect children had failed Agnes repeatedly. Agnes looked up at him, eyes wide, voice tiny. "Daddy, he keeps doing this." Those 5 words hit Morgan harder than any engine roar. He knelt beside her, whispering, "It's okay, baby girl. I'm here now. I promise this ends today." But he had no idea just how far ending today would go. Morgan remembered the promise he made to his late wife, Rebecca, on her deathbed. Whatever it takes, protect her. She's going to need you now. After Rebecca passed from stage 4 lung cancer, grief weighed heavily. The family had moved from Arizona to Texas to start fresh, but no amount of new streets, new schools, or new neighborhoods could shield Agnes from the cruelty that waited quietly behind the cafeteria walls. Morgan held her small frame, feeling her tension, her fear, her exhaustion from months of humiliation she'd shouldered alone. "Daddy, I didn't want to bother you," she whispered, tears threatening to spill. "I thought I had to deal with it by myself." Morgan's heart cracked. She had been silently protecting him from her own suffering. And in that moment, he realized brute force wouldn't fix this. He would need something far bigger, something that could shake the walls of the system that allowed this to happen. He straightened up, scanning the cafeteria. Every adult who could have helped had turned away. Every complaint had been ignored. Every rule bent to shield the bully. It wasn't just one boy. It was an institution that had decided some children mattered more than others. And Morgan Jacks was about to ensure that Agnes mattered. The next morning, Morgan asked Agnes to recount every incident, every humiliation. She spoke softly, but with the clarity of a child who had endured far too much. Kicked trays, name-calling, tripped in hallways, water poured on her chair. 12 documented complaints ignored. Teachers, counselors, and even the principal had known, but refused to act. Morgan's anger wasn't impulsive. It was focused. This was a system that rewarded the powerful, protected the connected, and silenced the weak. Evan Marsh was shielded by his father, Richard Marsh, a school board member, an influential businessman. His influence permeated every decision at Ridgeview Elementary. Morgan called parents he trusted, teachers who had tried to intervene, anyone who had a shred of evidence. The picture was clear. Justice would not come from polite conversations or meetings behind closed doors. It would come from visibility, from a presence that could not be ignored. He needed help. He needed his brothers in the Hells Angels, not to deliver violence, but to deliver attention, accountability, and a demand for truth. Morgan went to the Devil's Highway Diner, unofficial HQ of the Texas Hells Angels. He met Marcus Tank Williams, a brother with a history of loss and protection. Morgan laid out the story: the cafeteria, the months of bullying, the teacher who did nothing, the father protecting his son through influence. Tank listened, eyes narrowing. The question was clear. "Do you want fists or justice?" "Justice," Morgan replied. Within hours, 200 members mobilized, not to intimidate, not to destroy, but to shine a light on the injustice. Lawyers were assigned. Media contacts reached out. A precise operation began to document every failure of the school, every ignored complaint, every adult who had turned away. The Hells Angels' reputation for fear and chaos became a tool for accountability. The code they lived by, loyalty, brotherhood, and protection of the innocent, would guide their action. This wasn't about revenge. This was about exposing truth. 2 days later, the Hells Angels arrived outside Ridgeview Elementary. Cameras from local news crews captured hundreds of motorcycles lined up, engines rumbling like a storm. But the crowd was calm, organized, purposeful. Every member had a role: legal, media, documentation, outreach. Inside the school board meeting, Morgan presented evidence. Supported by lawyers and media, the room shifted. Whispers ran through the crowd. The Marsh family influence was challenged not with violence, but with truth, exposure, and sheer presence. Parents and teachers who had ignored Agnes now had no choice. The story story was undeniable. The proof was clear. And for the first time, Agnes saw the system respond, not with empty words, but with accountability. The school suspended the bully, the board held hearings, and policies changed to protect vulnerable students. The story went viral, highlighting not only Agnes' plight, but the power of community action when institutions fail. Morgan held his daughter close. Tears mingled with pride. She had endured months of silence, yet her father's unwavering protection had turned despair into empowerment. For the first time, Agnes laughed freely, no longer hiding, no longer kneeling on a cold cafeteria floor. Morgan realized something profound. Real power isn't in the roar of engines or the fear of outsiders. It's in protecting the helpless, demanding truth, and holding the system accountable. The Hells Angels didn't just ride for glory, they rode for justice, and this time they had won. Agnes returned to school with confidence. Teachers knew she would be protected. Parents knew that silence would no longer be tolerated. Morgan kept his promise. He had turned heartbreak into action, despair into empowerment, and his daughter's story into a movement. Some would still see motorcycles and leather and think of chaos, but the real story, the story that mattered, was courage, love, and relentless protection. Agnes was safe, justice had been served, and the world had watched, learning what happens when a father refuses to turn away.